Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Since Chloe was born, Mark felt like he had gained a new heart outside his chest. She was the one who filled his days with joy, curious questions, unexpected laughter, and a sweetness that was hard to explain. She was the daughter every father would dream of having. They had a relationship that went beyond the basics. They were confidants. He knew when something was bothering her even before she said a word. And for years, it worked like this: she trusted, he supported, and together they overcame any difficulty. But, lately, there was something different in her gaze. A kind of silence that wasn't usual. And that silence began to grow. Chloe, at 16, had always been communicative. She had strong opinions, laughed easily, and even when something upset her, she would end up venting. Only in the past few weeks, she had distanced herself. She would come home from school, go straight to her room, and make excuses to avoid any kind of conversation. Mark tried to strike up a conversation, talking about some show they both knew by heart or a song they used to listen to in the car, but she responded little. She would look at him for short moments and then look away, as if she were somewhere else. He thought it might be some teenage issue, maybe a boy, maybe a fight with friends, or insecurity about her own body. He knew that phase was full of ups and downs. But even trying to rationalize, his heart ached. Family dinners, which used to be moments of jokes and small talk, became heavy. Chloe ate quickly and always said she needed to study. When she was on the couch, she said she was sleepy. When he asked if everything was okay, she smiled. And that was the detail Mark noticed: the smile was forced. He even thought about asking directly if someone had hurt her. Part of him considered something more serious but decided not to create paranoia. He thought it was better to wait, give her space, trust that when she was ready, she would come to him. But as time passed, the void between them grew. And it consumed him. One night, after she went to bed, Mark found himself looking at a photo he kept on the shelf, a picture of the two of them at the beach, laughing as if the world were light. He remembered the sand sticking to her legs, the crooked glasses, the way she hugged him. It all seemed so recent, but now it felt distant. He wondered what he had done wrong, if he had failed somewhere along the way, if he should have insisted more on conversations or respected her silence less. He felt powerless. The most important person in his life was suffering, and he didn't know how to reach her. But Mark was her father. And even without answers, even without understanding the reason for that silent pain, he knew he would keep trying. Because giving up on Chloe never crossed his mind. What he didn't know was that the truth was about to arrive. And when it did, it would turn his world upside down. Mark left work early by chance. An appointment had been cancelled at the last minute, and he thought about taking the opportunity to pick up something for dinner and spend some time at home. He parked the car, grabbed the bags from the back seat, and as he approached the door, he heard a muffled cry. That made him stop. It was a low sound, muffled, but he recognized that voice. It was Chloe. He put everything aside and looked for her. He saw his daughter sitting on the porch steps, huddled, her face hidden between her arms. Her chest rose and fell with difficulty, as if she were trying to control a pain that had already gone beyond limits. He approached slowly and asked what had happened. She took a long time to respond. She tried to breathe between sobs, fidgeted with her fingers, as if searching for words that were still stuck in her throat. Mark didn't push. He just stayed there, close enough for her to feel she could talk, but without pressuring her. After a few minutes of silence and tears, she lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling, her expression weighed down by a burden that seemed too heavy for such a young body. And that's when she began to tell him. She said everything had happened the previous week. She was coming back from school, taking a different route. That's when she saw a familiar car parked on a quiet street, 2 blocks from home. It was her mother's car. She found it strange and approached quietly. When she got closer, she saw the two occupants. Her mother and Professor Dawson. They were kissing. A long, intimate kiss, as if they were longtime lovers. Chloe froze. She didn't know what to think or what to feel. She said time seemed to stop in that moment. The professor was someone she knew, he was in her classroom every day, and there, right before her eyes, he shared intimacy with her mother, as if nothing else existed around them. Jennifer seemed calm, smiling, touching his face tenderly. Chloe stood there, unseen, just watching the scene, as if watching her own reality collapse. After a few seconds, she ran. She got home and stayed locked in her room the rest of the day, digesting it all in silence. Since then, she had been trying to figure out what to do with that information. She tried to forget, tried to act as if it were a nightmare that would pass, but every time she looked at her mother, she felt a mix of confusion and anger. And every time she entered the history classroom, her stomach turned. She felt betrayed, exposed, dirty. And worse, afraid. Afraid to speak, to provoke a fight, to be blamed for destroying the family. So she chose silence, even though that silence was destroying her inside. Mark listened to everything in silence. He felt each word as if they were punches. But he kept his gaze steady on her, trying to convey security, even though inside he was falling apart. When she finished, he pulled his daughter into an embrace. She cried into his shoulder, hard. He felt her body trembling. And even though he didn't yet know what he would do, he knew what he needed to say right then, at that moment. He told her she wasn't alone. That he believed her. That he would do whatever was necessary to understand what was happening. And that, above all, she was his priority. That calmed her heart a little. For the first time in days, Chloe allowed herself to breathe deeply. Mark stayed with her until her eyes closed from exhaustion. Mark spent the night thinking about the woman he loved, the one he had shared his life with for so many years, who now was a huge question mark. And the professor, the same one he had greeted at school meetings, now had a face that burned like an insult. But he knew that before making any decision, he needed certainty. He needed proof. And that would come soon. What he still didn't imagine was how much that search for the truth would change everything. Not only his relationship with Jennifer, but also with his daughter, who now needed him more than ever. The next morning, Mark woke up with his head full of questions. He wanted to believe that everything was a big misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, an absurd coincidence. But Chloe's gaze from the night before, the tone of her voice, the way she trembled as she spoke, there was no room for doubt. He needed concrete certainty, needed to confront the facts with the clarity of someone who, even betrayed, still thinks clearly. And that's why, after dropping Chloe off at school, he stopped the car on the corner and sat there for a few minutes staring at the steering wheel, until he dialed the number of an old acquaintance. A childhood friend who had become a private investigator. Mark always thought he'd never need a service like this, but life sometimes takes us down unthinkable paths. And now, this was the only way out. He explained what he knew and what he suspected. He asked for absolute discretion. The detective was straightforward. He said he would need 7 days, maybe less, to bring something concrete. Mark didn't ask how he would do it, or where he would install cameras or microphones. He trusted the man's professionalism. And at that moment, he needed to trust someone. The following days dragged on. While Jennifer acted normally at home, preparing breakfast, folding clothes, asking trivial things, Mark could barely look at her for long. Every gesture of hers now seemed choreographed. Every smile felt out of place. He pretended a calmness his body didn't feel. He slept poorly, ate little, and all the while looked at Chloe with a mix of pain and pride. His daughter had carried the weight of the truth alone for a whole week. And still, she endured. That said a lot about her. On the 7th day, the detective sent a message. It simply said, "I have everything. Can we meet in person?" Mark felt his stomach churn. He visited the man's house that night. He received an envelope. Inside, there were printed photos and a USB drive. The first image was enough to take his breath away. Jennifer, holding hands with Professor Dawson, smiling as they entered a motel at 2 in the afternoon on a random Wednesday. Other photos showed meetings in cafes, inside the car, more kisses, more touches. And dates that matched her lunch hours, the days she said she was handling work matters. The evidence was there, cold, direct, leaving no room for excuses. Mark silently thanked him, paid for the service, and left driving, unsure if he felt angrier or more devastated. When he got home, he saw Jennifer on the couch watching TV. He went upstairs, took a long shower, put on a random t-shirt, and came back down with the envelope in hand. He sat across from her and simply handed it over. She opened it, looked at it, and by the third photo, her eyes started to fill with tears. Her hands trembled. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. When she finally managed to say something, it was a mix of justification and confession. She said she had been feeling lonely. That Mark spent too much time away. That she needed to be heard. That the professor appeared unexpectedly, at a time when she felt invisible. He remained silent. Just observing. With every word, he felt like he was seeing someone else in front of him. The woman he loved, the mother of his daughter, now seemed like an unfamiliar character he had never truly known. As the confession unfolded, Chloe appeared in the hallway. She stood still, listening to every sentence her mother spoke. The girl didn't say anything. She just locked eyes with her. And that was enough for Jennifer to completely break down. She tried to approach her daughter, but Chloe stepped back. She firmly said she didn't want to hear anything else. She went upstairs to her room without looking back. The silence left in the living room was suffocating. Mark kept his composure outwardly, but internally everything felt ablaze. His firm face hid the whirlwind. Then he raised his eyes and spoke in a low but firm voice, "You destroyed our family for a whim. You chose to hide, betray, deceive, instead of coming to me. And worst of all, you involved our daughter in this nightmare." He didn't yell. He let each word out with the weight of someone who had loved deeply and been deeply hurt. Disappointment was visible in his eyes, more than any anger. "I'm not perfect, but I've always been here. And you threw it all away as if it meant nothing." After that, he stood up and said she knew where the door was. There was no more discussion, no goodbye. Just the end. Jennifer understood that she had lost more than a marriage. She had lost her daughter's trust. She got up, went to the bedroom, packed a small suitcase, grabbed the car keys, and left. Mark didn't follow her. He stayed seated, staring at the empty envelope on the table. That night, Chloe came downstairs to get a glass of water. She found her father still awake, sitting on the couch, the TV turned off. She approached, rested her head on his shoulder, and the two stayed there, without saying anything. For the first time since everything began, there was a moment of peace. There was still pain, still unanswered questions, but at that moment, they were together. And that was already a start. 2 days after Jennifer's departure, Mark woke up determined. He couldn't shake the image of the professor involved with his wife, nor Chloe's expression hearing everything from the hallway. It still burned. He looked at the folder where the photos and report were stored, took a deep breath, and turned on the computer. He wrote a direct email, without beating around the bush, addressed to the school's administration. He attached the evidence, explained the facts clearly, and requested a formal investigation. He ended by saying that, as the parent of a student, he wouldn't tolerate a professional in education maintaining this kind of behavior with the mother of a student, jeopardizing the school environment. When he clicked send, he felt as if he had lifted a weight off his shoulders. It wasn't for revenge, it was for justice. And, above all, for Chloe. The school's response was quick. That same afternoon, Mark received a call from the coordinator. She thanked him for the information, confirmed receipt of the material, and informed him that Professor Dawson had been suspended pending immediate investigation. 2 days later, another email arrived. In it, the school officially announced the professor's dismissal due to conduct incompatible with professional ethics. They also guaranteed that a committee would be formed to review internal protocols and that the administration was committed to the safety and respect of all students. Mark read the message with relief. He didn't smile, but he felt he had done the right thing. Handing over that evidence didn't erase the pain of betrayal, but it was a necessary step to prevent anyone else from being hurt in the same way. Chloe learned about the professor's dismissal online. A classmate sent her the link to the news that was already circulating among parents' groups. She read it all in silence, then went to her father and asked if he had been responsible. Mark didn't lie. He said yes. He explained the reasons, said it was about protecting her dignity, the environment where she studied, and his integrity as a father. Chloe hugged her father tightly, without saying anything. It was the first time in weeks that she showed this kind of spontaneous affection. And that, for Mark, was more than enough. In the days that followed, the house settled into a new rhythm. There were still moments of silence, especially during the times when Jennifer used to be present. But it was a different kind of silence from the one of recent times. It was a silence that brought calm, not confusion. Mark reorganized their routine, adjusted his work hours to drop off and pick up Chloe from school, and started cooking with her at night. They chose simple recipes, some went wrong, but laughter returned. Little by little, the two began creating a new way to live together. Nothing seemed like before, but there was something new there. A care that grew in the small things. Chloe started talking again about her future plans and even mentioned a writing contest she wanted to enter. She said the theme was, "What is courage?" and that maybe she had something to say about that. The divorce came weeks later, discreetly and without disputes. Jennifer, already regretful and quieter than ever, decided not to fight over anything that might create more conflict. She said she preferred to see Mark and Chloe continue living in the house, that she didn't want to take her daughter's home away, and that keeping the old apartment they had bought together, the one they once planned to use as an investment rental, would be enough for her to start over. Mark accepted, not out of generosity, but because he wanted to end things with dignity. As for Professor Dawson, he didn't stay with Jennifer. After the scandal, no school wanted to hire him again, and he had to move to another city, where no one knew him. Everyone left Mark, but only some understood the real weight of the choices they made. Jennifer tried to reconnect a few times. She sent messages, asked if they could talk. Mark replied formally. He said contact should be made via email and only if it concerned their daughter. Chloe, on the other hand, chose silence. She read her mother's messages but didn't reply. She still couldn't deal with the image that was etched in her memory. For her, forgiveness was a long road, and that point on the road was still far away. Mark didn't interfere. He gave his daughter space to decide how she wanted to handle her mother. He knew forcing premature forgiveness could be crueler than absence. Time passed. Wounds healed slowly. And one day, when he least expected it, Chloe came home from school with an envelope. It was the approval letter for the contest. She had won. The text spoke about a father who became shelter when everything collapsed. Who didn't raise his voice, who chose the truth, and stood firm when the world fell apart. Mark read the essay sitting at the table, his eyes misty. Chloe, without saying a word, watched him. When he finished, he looked at his daughter and simply said, "You saved me too." And in that moment, both understood that what they had built together was stronger than any lie. Because some truths, when faced with courage, transform pain into strength and disappointment into an eternal bond. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael woke up early as always, had his coffee, checked the equipment in the truck, and left for another scheduled job. The request was simple: an electrical review at a newly renovated house on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of work he had been doing for years, with attention, professionalism, and without rushing. When he arrived, the homeowner showed him the breaker box and went upstairs to answer a call. Michael was left alone on the ground floor, inspecting the wires and replacing an outlet that seemed poorly installed. He did everything with focus, as always. His mind was calm, his heart at peace, life moving along the path he believed was solid. He was almost done when he realized he needed to grab a tool from the car. He went out the front door and headed toward the sidewalk. As he looked up, something made him stop mid-motion. Rachel, his wife. She was crossing the street alone, with a calm expression, as if she knew exactly where she was going. She walked straight to the house next to the one he was working on. Michael stood still, watching from a distance, trying to understand if what he was seeing was real. Before Rachel could ring the doorbell, the door opened. The man who appeared, Simon, smiled as if he had been expecting her. They kissed, as if it were part of their routine. Then she went inside without hesitation. Michael remained frozen, feeling his blood rush faster. That scene took his breath away. There was no doubt. It was certainty. It was more than a slip-up. It was familiarity. It was habit. He swallowed hard, clenched his teeth, and walked over to the house. When he got to the door, he knocked forcefully. 3 times. Straight. Clear and firm. The man appeared looking confused, clearly unsure who the visitor was. Michael stared at him and spoke with a voice full of tension. "Call my wife here. Now. Or I'm coming after you." Simon's face froze. Rachel appeared right behind him, eyes wide and face pale as paper. She put her hand to her chest, surprised. She tried to speak, but the words tangled. "Michael, I..." She was interrupted mid-attempt. He didn't want speeches. She tried to approach, but he raised a hand and said, "Stay there. You're not stepping foot in my house again. It's over. You chose. Now deal with it." He turned his back and walked away. He left the silence behind, along with the image of her standing at the door, completely stunned. He didn't stop to hear excuses or ask for reasons. Because at that moment, everything was painfully clear. No explanation would change what he saw. No apology would hold value after that kiss so natural and casual. When he got home, he went straight to the bedroom. He gathered all her clothes, shoes, perfumes, photographs, personal items. He carefully packed everything into the car. This wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a decision. He returned to the lover's house. He stopped in front, opened the trunk, and started leaving everything on the curb. Without saying a word. He just placed the items there, one by one, while some neighbors watched from a distance, whispering quietly. Michael acted calmly, without making a scene. He did what needed to be done. It was the end of a cycle, painful, but necessary. As he dumped the last box on top of the others, an older woman sweeping the sidewalk nearby stopped to watch for a few seconds, then shook her head, as if she'd seen this story before. Michael got into the car and drove away. For the first time, he felt that the house he lived in already felt lighter. In the days that followed, Michael woke up before the alarm, as he always did, but now the silence of the house had a different sound. The dishes in the drying rack, the toothbrush alone in the cup, the empty space on the right side of the bed, everything seemed to remind him that something had changed. He kept his routine, not out of obligation, but for survival. He got up, had coffee, grabbed his tools, and left for work. Neighbors watched with a certain respect as he passed by. Some avoided contact, others greeted him with a discreet nod, as if they recognized the pain he carried on his face. But he wasn't seeking comfort. He was too busy trying to regain balance within himself. Rachel, on the other hand, spent the first few days quiet in Simon's house. She felt the weight of the choice she had made, but still tried to believe she had made the right decision. She slept poorly, her head filled with images of what she had witnessed that afternoon: Michael standing at the door, the bags on the ground, the look on his face when he said she wouldn't return. That image clung to her like a bitter reminder. Simon tried to lighten the mood in the first few days, bringing her coffee in bed, making improvised dinners, trying to distract her. But she no longer smiled with the same lightness. And he noticed. Michael, at home, spent an afternoon clearing out cabinets. He stored away picture frames, removed the quilt she had chosen, rearranged the living room. He did it all in silence, as if dismantling a story with his own hands. He threw away old letters, tore up a birthday note he had kept for years, and even changed his phone ringtone. Everything that smelled of memory had to go. One Saturday, he took the papers to the lawyer. He simply said, "Go ahead and file. I don't want any disputes. I just want to finish this." And he left the office as if he had lifted a huge weight off his shoulders. Rachel tried to reach out. She sent messages, called from her mother's phone, emailed asking to talk before any decisions were made. She wrote that she still loved him, that she was confused, that she wanted to fix things. Michael read it all in silence. He deleted the messages, took a deep breath, and decided that responding would only prolong what had already ended. Her betrayal had caused a fracture that couldn't be repaired. He didn't need to hear excuses for something he had witnessed with his own eyes. Simon began to notice that Rachel avoided eye contact. She stayed in the bedroom most of the time, didn't talk about the future, complained about everything. Gradually, what had started as passion became discomfort. Rachel felt displaced in the house where she thought she'd be happy. Michael, on the other hand, was finding balance again. One day after work, he stopped at a bar, ordered a beer, and sat there quietly, observing the crowd. For the first time, he felt that breathing hurt less. 15 days later, the official delivered the papers to Rachel. When she read what was written, she felt a tightness in her chest. It was real. Michael wanted a divorce. And he was really going through with it. She signed, but cried for hours afterward. She had expected him to give in, to soften, to leave a door slightly open. But he had closed them all. On the morning of the final signing, both arrived at the notary's office at the scheduled time. Rachel avoided looking into his eyes. Michael simply greeted the clerk and picked up the pen. He signed firmly, without hesitation. Rachel signed right after, her hand trembling. When they finished, they glanced at each other for a brief moment. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be said. They left through separate doors, heading in opposite directions, carrying the exact weight of the choices they had made. And the freedom that only an ending can offer. A few weeks earlier. The story between Rachel and Simon began like many others that start in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with intentions no one dares admit up front. It all started at the gym. Rachel had begun going on a friend's recommendation. She said she wanted to take better care of herself, carve out some time to relax and feel better. Partly true. Her marriage no longer satisfied her as it once did, and she sought distractions. Michael never suspected a thing. While she attended spinning and weightlifting classes, he worked all day on installations and maintenance, believing they were building a solid life together, while she slowly built another reality, far from his sight. Simon was a weightlifting instructor. Young, outgoing, full of ready-made phrases and that easy smile many confuse for charm. He knew how to approach. He knew the right time to compliment, the perfect moment for a joke, the right measure to seem interested but casual. At first, Rachel found it amusing, that's all. She told her friends, said it was just his vanity. Over time, she started noticing more. One day she commented to a coworker, if I were single, I might even flirt with him." Then she laughed, as if it were just a joke. But deep down, it wasn't entirely a joke anymore. Simon started pulling her into more conversations. He asked about her day, talked about his own problems, positioned himself as someone who understood her frustrations. When she mentioned she was married, he smiled and said respect was important. But he didn't distance himself. On the contrary. He began observing her workouts more closely, correcting postures with lingering touches, commenting that she seemed different, prettier, more alive. And Rachel, who hadn't heard compliments in a long time, started waiting for them like someone craving a mild addiction. That routine of glances and scattered phrases became a ritual. Michael continued at home, preparing simple dinners for when she returned from the gym. She ate quickly, gave him a hurried kiss, and went to shower. She said she was tired, that the day had been tough. He believed her. Their first meeting outside the gym happened after days of this silent game. Rachel made up an excuse and met Simon at a nearby cafe. They talked for nearly 2 hours. She told him everything. About the pressures at home, the lack of attention, the small arguments that piled up. Simon listened as if he'd never judge her. The real mistake happened days later, when he invited her to see his new place. She hesitated, but went. And from that point on, everything that had been imagination became reality. They began seeing each other frequently. Simon, aware that she was married, didn't mind. On the contrary. He found it exciting. He said Michael was stupid for not seeing what he had at home. Rachel laughed, feeling desired. She felt alive again. But deep down, something unsettled her. She knew she was crossing a line she might not be able to return from. With every meeting, guilt arose, but it was drowned out by the adrenaline of the moment. Eventually, she stopped caring. Rachel began emotionally distancing herself from Michael in a cold way. She stopped asking about his day, avoided any one-on-one moments. She said she needed space, that she was focusing on herself. Michael, unaware of what was happening, respected it. He tried to please her, made surprises, offered help with chores. But nothing worked. She was already somewhere else. Her body still slept in the same bed, but her heart had a different address. And that's why she didn't hesitate to enter Simon's house that afternoon. Betrayal had become routine. The cruelest part is that, at certain moments, Rachel even believed she was trading stability for love. That she was freeing herself from emotional prison to live something new. But what she didn't see, or pretended not to see, was that this new relationship carried the same weaknesses she swore to avoid. Simon enjoyed the game, the chase, the thrill of transgression. But no one can sustain that for long. Desire born in the shadows doesn't survive when exposed to daylight. At that time, Rachel felt powerful. She imagined she had control over everything. She was living 2 lives and deciding when to enter and exit each one. She thought that if things ever fell apart with Michael, she'd have Simon to fall back on. What she didn't consider was the character of someone willing to enter a relationship where another person must be deceived. And what begins by hurting someone eventually turns against the one who caused the harm. But that, she would only understand later. For now, she was convinced she had won. That she had come out on top. That she had chosen. And that she would be happy, no matter the cost. At first, life with Simon seemed like a victory. She believed she had made a smart trade. She began posting subtle photos on social media, smiling alongside him at restaurants, cafes, and hiking trails. Close friends pretended to support her, but behind the scenes, they whispered. Michael didn't comment. He never said anything to anyone, didn't care to know what was happening with her. His lack of reaction was, in fact, what bothered her the most. She expected fury, scandal, pleas to come back. His silence was the first crack in the castle she thought she had built so firmly. Life with Simon seemed light, but it only took a few weeks for everything to change. What had been desire turned into cohabitation. And with it came small frustrations. Simon was no longer the charming man from the gym. He no longer cared to listen, lost patience quickly, complained about work, got irritated with demands. Rachel began to feel like she was in a familiar place, dissatisfaction, routine, disconnection. Only this time, without the foundation of respect she once had. Instead of trying to communicate, she repeated the same mistakes. She distanced herself. She stayed silent. She spent more time at the hospital where she worked part-time than at home. She started telling herself it was just a phase, that she needed to wait it out. But inside, something began to collapse with force. 3 months after the separation, Rachel met a new physical therapist who had just started working at the same facility. Young, attentive, friendly. They began chatting during breaks, exchanging messages, having lunch together. It was exactly the same pattern as when she met Simon. Only this time, she didn't reflect on her choices. She gave in without resistance. She created excuses to leave the house, started lying to Simon, invented extra shifts, fabricated meetings. She began living 2 worlds again, as if she hadn't learned a thing. The thrill of feeling desired was stronger than any memory of pain caused to others. The previous betrayal, which destroyed a marriage, hadn't served as a lesson. It served as a model. The following Friday, Simon decided to leave work early. He was suspicious, irritated by her behavior. He arrived home and saw her car in the driveway. He entered silently. He stopped at the living room door and froze. Rachel was lying on the couch with the physical therapist. They were laughing as if they were at a hotel, as if nothing else mattered. Simon didn't shout. He didn't make a scene either. He walked up to them, pointed to the door, and said with a frightening calm, "You two have 2 minutes." Rachel tried to argue, but he had already turned his back. He went into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, packed her clothes, and threw them onto the curb. The guy left without saying a word. Rachel stood there, motionless in the middle of the living room, as if finally understanding what she had done. Simon slammed the door with controlled force and leaned against the hallway wall, feeling his heart race. For a moment, he tried to organize his thoughts, to process what he had just seen. Rachel, on the couch, with another man. On the same couch where they watched movies, where she said she felt at peace. All of that crumbled before him like a silent avalanche. He brought his hand to his face, muffling a sigh that came uninvited. And there, alone in the hallway, it hit him with brutal clarity. A sentence cut through his mind like a blade, "Now I'm in his place. That's exactly what I did to her husband." He stood still for a while, staring into the void. The pain wasn't just from the betrayal. It was the mirror. It was the reflection of his own mistake coming back with force. He felt shame. Anger at himself. Because for the first time, he understood, firsthand, what it meant to be destroyed by someone he trusted. Everything Michael had felt, he was now experiencing. Without anesthesia. Without excuses. And the bitterest part of it all was that he knew he deserved it. In the days that followed, she tried to justify herself. She sent messages, said she was confused, that their relationship had changed, that she was lonely. Simon read each message with a sick feeling in his stomach. It was like seeing a mirror throw back every word he had used months ago to justify what he did to Michael. In that silent downfall, Simon understood what it means to get involved with someone who betrays without resolving what they carry inside. And he also understood that he deserved to go through that. For the first time, he acknowledged his own responsibility. But the regret came too late. Meanwhile, Michael moved on with his life in peace. He no longer carried the weight in his chest. He worked as always, maintained his routine, took care of himself. A mutual friend told him about Rachel's latest betrayal. He expected to see Michael outraged. Michael just smiled. he didn't say a word. The feeling he had was that the universe had placed every piece in its rightful place. It didn't cause him pain, nor joy. It was just confirmation of something he had always known: character doesn't change with the scenery, it changes when someone chooses to be different. And Rachel kept searching in others what she had never managed to develop within herself. One night, Michael was at a bar with an old childhood friend, Thomas. He told the whole story. Thomas listened without interrupting. At the end, he ordered 2 more beers, raised his glass, and said with a laugh, "I learned something from all this: never trust a gym full of personal trainers with billboard smiles." Michael gave a slight laugh, raised his glass too, and replied, "And never settle for less than you deserve." They toasted. Rachel, now temporarily living with a cousin, cried often. The series of losses had left visible marks. She tried to return to the hospital with her head held high, but the gossip had already spread. The physical therapist was transferred to another department. Simon didn't reach out anymore. Michael didn't respond to any emails. And she, surrounded by her own echo, began to understand what she had caused. No one needed to yell at her, no one needed to slam doors or raise their voices. It was the absence of response that showed her the weight of each choice. Because some losses are only truly felt when everyone is already gone. And Michael, on the other side of this story, closed a chapter. Without drama, without noise, without looking back. He carried the dignity of someone who was betrayed but didn't let himself become like those who wronged him. His true victory was moving forward without becoming bitter, without harboring resentment, without seeking revenge. His peace came from the strength to know when to walk away. And when someone has the courage to leave with their head held high from a situation like that, the fresh start begins clean. Life may take its time, but sooner or later, it always responds. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.